really wonderful refugee leaders who are going to share with us about their experiences running for office, hopefully inspire some of you to do the same. Before we kick this off, I just wanted to say a couple of words about logistics. One is that we will hope to have some time at the end for questions. You should see, if you're logged into the Zoom, a Q&A button at the bottom. So please put your questions in there. There's also a poll towards the bottom. If you can click that and take a minute to answer that poll, we'd appreciate it. Secondly, I wanted to share with you that Voice for Refuge has launched some new resources this week for refugee candidates. So Caitlin will put in this link in the chat, but please go check that out. There's a quick start guide on running for office, some information on how to file in your state, as well as a communications guide there. And finally, we are hosting a survey for former refugees who have run for office in the past. Like our panelists, we want to hear from you about your experiences and learn about ways that we can help support other candidates. So if that applies to you and you can go take the survey, we would really appreciate that. I also, apologies for not mentioning this sooner, that this webinar is co-hosted by New American Leaders Action Fund, and we're grateful for their partnership and for tonight's event. So with that, I am going to pass it off to our moderator, Khoeun from Skokie Village. She's a Skokie Village trustee in Illinois. She was first elected, her first elected office was as Skokie Park District Board in 2017. And at that time, she was the first Cambodian American woman elected to public office. So a real accomplishment. And since then, she's held several different offices, including as commissioner and vice president on the Skokie Park District Board, and is now a trustee. And having been born in a refugee camp to Cambodian refugee parents, she also serves as the president of the National Cambodian Heritage Museum and Killing Fields Memorial. So we're really grateful to have her join us and to moderate. So I'll pass to you. One of our panelists will hopefully, Commissioner Phi should be getting on the video shortly, but we'll go ahead and she can introduce who else we have tonight. Thanks.
Great, thanks a lot, Mary Elizabeth. Welcome, everyone. Again, my name is Khem. I am currently a trustee within the village of Skokie, which is just outside the Chicagoland area, if you're not familiar with that. Thank you for joining us in this program, Running for Office, a panel discussion with refugee leaders. We have an incredible panel of women leaders who come from refugee communities. We have with us a public health leader, a business owner, legal aid attorney, refugee advocates, public servants, community leaders, mothers, people who wear multiple hats in our everyday lives who decide to run for public office. So what does that mean? Why did we decide to run for office? What were some of the challenges? What were some successes? Tonight, we get to hear from them. This conversation is an opportunity to share some unique perspectives and insights for those who are considering running for office, and for those who never considered running for office, because I never considered running until I did. So we hope that you will be able to take something out of value away from the panel tonight. So we'll begin with introductions, and I'll have each panel introduce themselves by sharing their name, their position or roles, and if they were first in their community, what that was. Anyone can volunteer.
There's always that awkward pause. I'll go first. My name is Vanna Howard. I live here in Lowell, Massachusetts, in the heart of downtown Lowell. I live here with my husband and 2 children and a dog. I represent the 17 Middlesex district, and that's Lowell, half of Lowell really, and 1 precinct in Chelmsford.
Represent Nguyen.
Great. Well, first of all, thank you so much. As we were talking, behind the scenes, we were just commenting on how wonderful it is to have such organizations like Voice for Refuge, as well as New American Leaders, to help and promote refugees and immigrants, to make sure that we are represented at the table. And I'm just so honored to be here among such powerful community leaders. And I have to say that it is not often that we get to be in a room, albeit a virtual room like today, with so many women of color, with such powerful women who've made huge differences in their communities. And as a first in the state as well, it's really amazing to me that, it took until 2018 for us to be a first. And I think many of us here are newly elected as well. Like, why did it take that long? So I got so excited to be here with you all. I didn't even introduce myself. So my name is Tram Nguyen, state representative from Andover, Massachusetts. I have lived in Massachusetts since I came with my family as refugees when I was 5 years old. And I'm so proud to be the very first Vietnamese American woman to ever run for office and win a seat here in the Commonwealth. But I am standing on the shoulders of so many others who have shattered ceilings and paved the way. And that's what we hope to do, is to continue to build on that pipeline to make sure that more voices are represented at the table. And it's such a pleasure to be here with you. And we hope that we will inspire many of you to also consider running for office.
You did such a great job introducing yourself and just sort of encapsulating what we want to have out of this discussion tonight, Representative Nguyen. And then Representative Howard, you also are the first as well, the first Cambodian American woman in the state legislature in the country, right?
I think so. Yes, the first Khmer woman, I've been told, to be elected as a state legislator in the country. But Khoeun, you paved the way. Congratulations for being the first Khmer woman running for office and elected to office. You're the first. You're the first in both. So.
Thank you. And this is all happening within a very short period of time. So it's happening, and we're hoping that we'll be able to see more faces out there joining us on the other side. Commissioner Phi, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, absolutely. Hello, everyone. My name is Nafisa Phi. I'm originally from Somalia. I've been in America for about 5 years now, and my pronouns are she, her, and hers. I currently live and am elected in Oregon, and I am one of we're about 36 counties in Oregon, and we're the second largest county, and I'm one of the commissioners for that county. And I was elected in just the last cycle, November 2020.
Thanks for joining us today. We do also have Ms. Clara Hart who will be joining us shortly, but we're going to go ahead and begin with some questions. And so my first question for all of the panelists is, as you all know, running for office is not a small endeavor. It requires so much of you and your communities to make that happen. So can you please, who do you identify as your community? And then can you share a little bit about why you think it's important for refugees or children of refugees to get involved in electoral politics and run for office? We'll have Representative Nguyen start us off.
Great, thank you for the question. It is so important for refugees and children of refugees to be represented and to have them run, because we need people who look like them to be in office, who have the shared experiences, who represent the same values. And so it's so important for refugees and children of refugees to consider running, not only to represent the refugee community, but their own community as a whole. So as I mentioned earlier, I immigrated here with my family from Vietnam when I was 5 years old. Growing up, I never saw a Vietnamese American woman in elected office. And as an adult, I have met some AAPI women who've held office, and they have been incredibly helpful to me, and I want to be helpful to those who are coming down the pipeline. And I have to say, being the only one, the only Vietnamese American woman in office, or at least at the legislature level in Massachusetts, and seeing very few other AAPI women. Vanna is now, she's joined the ranks recently, and now we went from 2 to 3 to 5, which is very exciting. It's progress, but there's more to be done. But oftentimes, because there are so few of us, it can feel very lonely at times, right? I'm sure you all remember the incident in Atlanta back in March that resulted in 8 deaths, 6 of whom were AAPI women. I filed a hate crimes bill, and at that time, I filed it before the incident happened. Right after the incident happened, all of the media were calling me to try to get my comments on that. And basically, I was the only one shouldering those questions, because there aren't enough of us to have these conversations, to reflect and talk about our, how that impacts us. And what, just because we're in office doesn't mean we're not also people, right? With emotions and reactions, and seeing other AAPI women treated that way has taken a toll on us. And so it is so important for us to continue to advocate and work together to make sure that we are bringing more people to the table, making sure that we are supporting immigrants, refugees, children of immigrants and refugees, and standing up for vulnerable communities and protecting them. We know how important it is to fight for resources for these vulnerable communities, because when I came over with my family at 5 years old, we relied on community resources, and that was how we were able to succeed. For me to become the first in my family to go to college, to go to law school, and what that means to invest in immigrant communities and how they can give back tenfold, 50-fold, 100-fold, 1,000-fold. And that's the investment that we're making now. And that's the progress that we're fighting for right now. And I'm just so excited that we're seeing great momentum. We just elected the first AAPI daughters of Taiwanese immigrants as the first mayor of Boston, the first woman, the first person of color. That's exciting. And I think that we're seeing that trend across the country as well. And I'm just so happy to be a part of all of that.
I love your passion. And, just thinking about the reason why we're here today is that we may be the first in our communities, but we're definitely not the last. And we hope to encourage to see more people run for office. Representative Howard?
Yeah, thank you so much for the question, Cam. Who do I define as my community? So here in the 17 Middlesex district, we have a broad cross section of society, people of color, from low income to high income, no income, people looking for income. And I think not just refugees or former refugees, should be get involved in politics and run for office. I think everybody should, as a matter of principle, really, no matter what your station in life, you are in. And so the more kinds of people are making decisions, you get better decision for more people. And so like the old saying, it's still true to this day. If you're not at the table, you're on the menu. And so we need more diverse voices at the table. And that's why, I think every sector, every diverse community should be involved and engaged in politics, and everybody should.
I love your inclusive messaging. Commissioner 5?
Yeah, I think I would say ditto to everyone. I think the same stories exist here in Oregon, and I think you're hearing a trend. Oregon, I think we're a pretty white state, and I think of my community as people of color, and then also people who are low income and marginalized communities in the LGBTQ community. Why I ran for this was really, the county I'm in is over 100 years old. It's even older than our state. This county existed long before the state of Oregon was even incorporated into the union. Yet we've never had a person of color really at this level of diversity challenge and actually win. For me, it was sort of to inspire and empower the community to say, we deserve to be at this seat. and if anything, to showcase who we are and to show the magnitude of diversity within our communities, and just to challenge that narrative. And the community saw something and were really mobilized and galvanized on, around my race, and said, you know what, you're right, and we'll stand behind you and help you win, to really put to rest to the narrative that exists for our county. We are one of the most diverse county in Oregon. We're the only one that this diverse. Majority of people of color are heavily concentrated on my county, yet we've never had a seat. And I think when I was running, there was only one elected official for my county that was a person of color. So it was really to just challenge the narrative of demonstrating that, or sending this perspective truth that people of color don't belong here or don't belong at this level of leadership. And we show that that's not true, and that representation, most importantly, matters to our community, and that we're going to demand that representation and demonstrate our power. And I ended up, it was heavily contested. It turned into all kinds of ways, got super messy. But by the power of the people, we showed and turned people out, and I ended up winning in a landslide.
That's amazing. And was this your first time running for public office?
For me?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Yes, this is my first time, and actually I've never even thought about running for office before this. And I even went through different programs and never really thought of that. But in, I think 2018 or 2019, maybe 2018, I was a small business owner and did a lot of fund development and stuff. And then got a contract to lobby, and actually a perfect topic for the refugee resettlement agencies that are in our state. They were asking high money to the state of Oregon, and I was able to help out with that bill pass and get that money. And the more I spent time in our capital, the more I kept hearing the narrative of and the lack of diversity that exists within our county, and decided that I was going to challenge. But this is the first time ever that I've ever ran for office, and I chose local government because I used to work for a county, and when I was doing community advocacy and mobilizing, I started out with county, implementing public health policies and tobacco prevention policies at the local level, and it was a natural fit for me to try to help out at that level, at the local level, and really not. So I never really looked into the state level, but when you're a lobbyist and spend time at the state, people are like, why don't you run for this office? And in fact, our state legislator at that time was retiring, and kept saying, Nafisa, have you thought about it? And I didn't really want it state, but then the opportunity presented itself. Our county commissioner for my district retired after 20 years, and I just said, waited around to see who would throw their names out. And when I didn't hear a person of color's name being thrown out, I said, you know what, I'll challenge this. What do I got to lose? If anything, I built more relationships and whatnot. And I remember I was actually in a lobbying contract for DC and got a call and said, are you going to run for something? Have you decided what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. I'm heading to DC. I'll come when I come back. But after I got off the plane, I was like, if I ever run for something, it will be to challenge that narrative that we deserve a seat at the county to be one of the 5 members deciding how resources get allocated and how policies get implemented for our county. And I remember just making that in DC, making that decision to run. And then I came back and said to somebody that I was interested in running, and then that rumor just got ahead of me, and before I knew it, everybody announced for me. And but that was fun. I think I appreciate everyone, their excitement. I think,
It was
but
your
yeah,
time. It was your time. Representative Howard, can you share with us, was this the first time for you running for office? And then what had you decide to run?
Yes, so last year I ran in 2020. That was my first race for state representative for anything. So people have pushed me for years to run, even actually a decade. I just never interested, never considered running for office. I was happy, just being in the community, serving on nonprofit boards. So I was happy there. And so when I decided to run last year, it was in the middle of a pandemic. And so my first race in a pandemic, in a lockdown, really. And so we had to find volunteers, and my team and I had to find creative ways to reach constituents in the district, at the same time making sure, taking all the precautions to keep myself and the volunteers, the team safe, but also folks that have been isolated because of the shutdown. And so why I ran, it's really because when I decided to run, it's because the district needed a change, needed new voice, needed a representative to represent them for the best interest on their behalf on Beacon Hill. So I jumped in and it was tough. It wasn't easy. And so but I had all the support, from my team, from the volunteers to and to make it happen.
That's amazing. And it's just the fact that we also have to learn to adapt and be creative in the best and worst of times. And then the common theme I'm also hearing is just the authentic voice as well, right? As elected officials, that having a seat at the table so that we can represent the diversity of the communities that we serve as well. Representative Nguyen, do you want to share a little bit about your experience, what brought you into office and your first time?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm hearing also a common theme that none of us really planned for this. And it's that, people push us into it. And I think that there's a statistic out there that basically says, women need to be asked 7 times before they would even consider running for office.
Yep.
But I would say that, women of color often aren't even asked at all. So I'm actually really excited to hear that all of us have been asked to run. And that was how we got into this, because for me, I never thought about running. I was a legal services attorney and I was helping vulnerable people in the courtroom and also advocating for legislation to help them and to make sure that we are fixing the system to make sure that they get the resources that they need. And so in making the decision to run for office, it was not an easy one because I decided to take on an incumbent. And the reason why I decided to do that in 2018 was that I reached out to him for 2 years to ask to meet with him to talk about bills that I was working on at the time. And that was paid family medical leave, earned income tax credit to make sure we're supporting working families, increase in minimum wage to make sure that we are supporting the people who are most vulnerable. And my representative did not get back to me for 2 years. And then I looked into it further and realized just how anti-immigrant he was, or actually is, I should say, because he's so involved in politics, even though he's no longer in this position. But the straw that broke the camel's back that made me take that leap of faith was when he filed an amendment to allow police officers to arrest anyone who looks illegal, essentially making racial profiling legal. That's just outrageous to me. And so I felt like I had no choice but to run against the state representative at the time. He did not stand for the values that I care for, and he does not he does not represent most of the people in my community. And so I wanted to build a stronger, more inclusive and welcoming community for all. And I didn't feel that my representative represented any of those values or priorities. And so I decided to run against him. And it was a very difficult race because I was completely the underdog. That was my first race. I knew some people, but I really wasn't the traditional candidate, as you will. I don't think that this community has ever been represented by a person of color, to be honest with you. And so when I decided to run for office, it took a lot of door knocking to convince people. And I think the one other thing that, Asian American women particularly have to face as a barrier is that we look a lot younger than we are. So I'm in my mid 30s. And when I was running, I was in my early 30s and I looked very young. So a lot of people just assumed like, what experience do you have? And I was like, I'm an attorney. That's my experience. And, I worked on policy and passed bills, and your current state representative had been in office for 8 years and had never passed a bill. And so, but it took so many of these conversations to prove to people that not only am I capable, and not only do I have the drive, but that, I have the experience because I looked so young in any of the materials I sent out. So we had to go door to door to convince everyone, and it worked. We need to be able to continue to, change that narrative that we may be a non quote unquote traditional candidate, but we have all the credentials and our voices are much needed.
One thing I wanted to follow up regarding that was, when I ran for office, I didn't know anything about running for office, right? And I had talked to other people who had run for office, and their approach to campaigning was very much different. And luckily, I had a mentor and advisor who had just run and won countywide as the first Asian American, and so she mentored me. And her advice to me was, "You're Asian. You can't campaign the way everyone else campaigns. Like, you have to work 3 times as hard as anybody else, even though you are more qualified, even though you have the experience. It's because people don't recognize your name, and name recognition is so important." Because I was struggling with, do I go by Khem or do I go by Khemarey? And like, nobody knows how to pronounce Khemarey. And so that was something I struggled with my campaign. It's like, even like, which name do I use? Because people vote based on name recognition and who they feel is a familiar name that they can identify with. So like, overcoming that challenge, especially in a community where you are still a minority, it's definitely a challenge. Can you speak a little bit more about some lessons learned on the campaign trail? I know, Representative, how you talked about having to adapt during COVID and what that meant in terms of safety. Commissioner Nafisa, Commissioner Fai, can you talk a little bit about, what were some lessons that you learned on the campaign trail when you were campaigning? Oh, she may have stepped out. Okay, let's, Representative Howard, is there anything that you want to add to that?
Yeah, I mean, I just want to go back a little bit. So when I decided to run, when it took a while. It took me a while to make my decision to run. And so by the time I decided, now we're in a lockdown. Now we're at the end of April, almost May. I find it's like, if I'm going to run, I'm going to run for all the right reason. I'm, running to do something, not to be something, not for just a title. Okay, and so April 30th, I finally made my decision. I sent out a press release and announced, and the deadline to collect signatures at the time is, for 150. So I didn't have a lot of time to collect 150. 150, you need to double it or triple it, right? Okay, in the middle of a lockdown, how do I go and knock on doors and get 300 signatures in less than 3 weeks? Pre-pandemic, you can get 300 signatures in an hour or 2. But everything was shut down, and so we got it. In a few days. I was just so grateful and honored and fortunate to have volunteers after volunteers risk their lives to go and collect signatures with me. when I mentioned earlier about creative ways to run your first campaign, we started with collecting signatures, and so we did everything. We attached the nomination paper to the back of our car, behind the windshield wiper, so that, and then we call the constituents to come out, our friends to come out, use their own pen to sign the nomination paper. I mean, there were many stories to tell how we had to collect signatures during a pandemic, and so, but we did it. And the day we collect more than 300, that's when the Secretary of State announced that he was going to extend the deadline for another week, and that the signature requirement was cut in half from 150 to 75. But we did it. We collected 300, you know, and so yeah, it was such a learning curve. I mean, we did everything we could just to get enough signatures just to get on the ballot.
Representative Nguyen, I'm sorry. Can you share a little bit about what you learned during the campaign trail?
Absolutely. Well, I have to say that Rep. Howard's being modest here. It was her first race, but she's not new to the rodeo for sure, because she's helped a lot of other candidates with our campaigns, and certainly was very helpful in mine. And so I think that experience helped you out and got you where you needed to be, which I'm really thrilled that I'm serving with her now. But, you know, I think that the 2018 and 2020 were very interesting years. There were just a lot to adapt to. And to be frank, I thought I had cold feet. I didn't think I was going to run in 2018, and I was going to wait until 2020. And I'm so glad that I didn't, just given all the difficulty of 2020. But I decided to run, and really the most difficult part, to your point earlier, Khem, was really the name recognition. It is very real. We had discussions about, should I be changing my name to my fiance's last name just because his last name is Powers? That's just so much easier for people. But we decided to stick with my name because I think it's very important for people to see this name. And so we came up with clever slogans so people would remember. Win with win, very easy. Winning Powers, we're winning today, you know, so we use all of these ways to try to get people to remember my name. And this goes to also the othering piece, right? Like, Asian Americans tend to be perpetual foreigners, no matter how long you've been in this country. And so that's an additional barrier that we needed to prove, to show that I am from here. I grew up in this community. Some of my first grade teacher reached out and said, I'm your constituent, how do I help? You know, my middle school teachers came out in support, and all these other people that could prove that I am from here. And it is so frustrating that we have to prove that. You know, that's not an assumption that's made automatically just because we are, whether it's Asian Americans or immigrants generally, that we don't belong. And that's a huge barrier to get over. And I think the other barrier too is the cost of running for office. People don't think about that. Not only does it take a lot of money to run a campaign, whether it's to pay for literature, to make sure that you're doing events, to do outreach to people, but it's also the personal cost to your life. Like, for me, I had to take 7 months off out of my job to run full time. And I say this all the time, that it's truly a privilege that I was able to run for office. And how do we work to address these barriers so others who aren't in that position could still run for office? Because it's so cost prohibitive for most folks. And I'm thankful for my fiance, who, you know, was able to pay the mortgage for us as I took time off out of my job to run full time. But that was what it took to take on an incumbent. I door knocked every single day from 9 in the morning to dark, every day. And that was how I was able to get to the voters that I needed in order to win that race. And I was very proud of my team, who went out there, gave it their all. And we got people, when we were polling, they said, oh, you have about a 30% chance of winning. We got 55% of the votes because we met people. And I took this seat from a far right Tea Party Republican who were so anti-immigrant, anti-everything we stand for. And the electorate spoke, and they spoke very loudly that they wanted a change. But that certainly just took so much effort from us, and we all need to be there to for each other to make sure that we are not only supporting each other financially, but how do we make systemic changes so that these costs would be lessened so that other people from different backgrounds can join the ranks as well.
I mean, you make some really excellent points. I mean, thinking about the technical aspects of running a campaign, understanding, the petition gathering process, the financial aspect of it, having to go out and fundraise. Like that was the first time I ever had to go out and learn how to get comfortable asking for money from people, and realizing that they were supporting you as a candidate, and that's exactly what they want to do, and feeling comfortable about it, because I think that's also a cultural barrier for most people, but I think also for women as well, right? And thinking about like, going out and asking people for money to contribute and support the work that you're doing. Commissioner Fye, would you mind sharing with us also in terms of, on the campaign trail, what were some obstacles that you learned along the way, and some learned lessons there?
Yeah, I think I complicated my own race. I feel like I was pregnant with this little guy here when I ran for office, and I remember being like 8 or sorry. Childcare is sideways today. So, I think one of the things I learned is, okay, Peggy, I'm talking, mommy. Hold on. Go that way.
We're all used to it right now. We're all used to it right now.
Go that way, Becky.
Kudos to all the moms for juggling so many things. Good
It's
for you.
That guy talking used to identify himself a campaign manager when he was, now he's prime, but he's, one of the things I learned is, like there's a perception people have, especially when it comes to candidates of color, and I felt like I experienced all of that. And, and worked really hard for not only for myself, but the little girls who are watching my race and can really see themselves in myself. And I remember one of the community had an event for me, and there were a lot of kids there. And I remember telling them I'm running for a county commissioner, and they're like, what is that? And they couldn't understand. And they're like, I said, like a president. And they're like, oh, like a President Trump? And I said, oh, and they could relate to that. And their eyes just changed, and they were just so excited. They ended up grabbing my sign, and they kept asking for pictures. And it was really like the inspiration candidates of color have for young kids of color. I really, my eyes opened to that. I didn't know the empowerment element and how the magnitude of that element and the effect it has on young kids. But I learned that the campaign is really hard and a lot of work. And, whoever dubbed the idea that political is personal said it well. People tend to tell you this is political and this is politics, but it is personal because there's a person running. And my campaign, I said earlier, was messy. I think my race, my gender, everything was attacked. And perseverance and having a strong community around you, strong women around you, was a learning lesson for me, because they were really an anchor. And then leaning back to the community, because when you hear something really, heart-wrenching, you just ask the community, this is what I'm being told, and then themselves being that validator to say, nope, that is not our definition, this does not apply to us, you keep plugging away and keep doing. Having those kind of people was really helpful, and having communities that see themselves in me, supporting me. And I learned, the idea of door knocking. It's not an easy task. But then one of the most thing that I couldn't get over for me, that was really most difficult. I come from poverty, So fundraising elements was really difficult for me. And getting over that back then, I almost didn't even commit to running. And the campaign consultant that I was talking to told me I had to raise 80,000. I said, I don't even know a rich person. Where would I get this money? But having a good person to tell you, well, you just raise that $1 a day and you go from there was helpful. So that was my journey in a nutshell.
Thanks for sharing, Commissioner Phi. So I see here that Ms. Clara Hart has joined us, and welcome.
Thank you.
Would you mind just briefly introducing yourself to us? And what we're talking about right now is running for office.
Yes.
And both, we're talking about the challenges of running for office, and you ran, and some win and some don't. But what was your experience like running for office, and what were some important lessons that you learned in the process?
Well, thank you so much, members of the panel and moderator and everybody else that put this event together. There's nothing that I like to talk about than running for office. This little woman running for office in the Midwest, you know, some of the places where you, but to run for office for me was a journey that I was planning to, I was pursuing since I was 6 years old. How did that come up with, for a 6-year-old somewhere in Mozambique, dreaming about running for office? I had no clue what that meant, but to me, I thought being busy in life and working with the others, that was the most energetic and healthy thing to do. So I was so envious when I see people working, and I wasn't. I was just 6-year-old. So that was my dream at the age of 6-year-old, and mostly to turn number 50. I wanted to turn 50, and I wanted to get as busy as possible. So when I came to the United States, okay, 1988, lived in San Diego for 1 year and moved to South Dakota since 1989 up to now. So once I got here, I felt this was a place that I can really do something to make someone's life a difference. I didn't jump in just working with people with a similar background like me. For example, former refugee, immigrant, asylee. No, when I joined this community, I went and volunteered everywhere. Because I figured this is my community. They don't have that refugee status from the beginning. So in 2008, that's when I turned 50. So you can imagine, do you remember other campaigns that were going on? Yeah, the Obama, Hillary, and I don't know, other guys. So it happened to be 2008, I turned 50. So I started thinking and planning. I became so scared. Why I was scared that I was going to be, I'm so shy when it comes to asking money for my campaign. I can raise money for other people, but it should not be attached with my name. I just didn't feel it was right. So we entered in the Senate seat, state Senate seat in District 10 in 2008 as a Democrat. So there was a guy, an incumbent was a Republican, and he had that seat like as long as he wanted. In fact, before District 10, my friend, he's now passed on, was part of gerrymandering. So he created this district, so he's able to win. And this is the problem we have with the redistricting. We need to talk to our people more about it. So And if someone tried to run against him, because he was appointed by Ronald Reagan as a highway patrolman or chief. So then prior to that, he was sheriff for many years. And so he was in law officer position for many years. So he knew people maybe having access to the records. So people that had run in front before me against him did not have a good experience, because he would threaten them, he would intimidate them, and he would tell them, well, he's gonna out them by listing all their criminal background. So when I declared that I was gonna run for office in District 10 as a state senator, as a Democrat against Mr. Jean Abdallah, whoa. People came to me, even my workmate, the resource officers, the police office resources told me, Clara, why did you have to pick that seat? You know, we can vote for you. Jean Abdallah is running. And I said to this officer, I said, Doug, this is a secret vote, right? And the ballot. How would you know that you voted for me? Come on, go. So I was able to talk to law enforcement like that if they came to me. But a lot of people were very excited about me running. And when it came to money, I didn't have to organize much. And the party was able to help me with some little money, and we raised a few funds. But before anyone thinks of running, you have to know what you're running about. Not just going to present in a middle school composition or present. No, you gotta know your community. Now, District 10 was a large place, but you have to know running around it. Every person, I think, who runs in that district or anywhere else, you have to know those people that live there, especially the people that are going to work on a campaign. That part I didn't have a problem with it. I'm the only Clara in the whole state of South Dakota. So prior to declaring, I gathered a group. This is the committee. Everybody that thinks of running for office, you need to have this. If it's a year ahead of time, wherever. This committee will be, okay, the candidate, treasurer, campaign manager, and the others to the communication person to work on your website. I think in those days, we had websites. They were not Facebook page. We didn't use that, at least me. So those people are going to be your eyes, because you can fundraise. You can work on a website or do these things. You can't do that. So once you have those people in place, then you're good to go. So once I got my paperwork, my treasurer is the one that did the paperwork. And the communication person also, because there's the paperwork that you have to file to be a legit candidate. So that one out of the way, time to call the press. Say, you have to tell them what you're running about. What are your 2-3 favorite things? On my part, I'm still upset that our educators in this state are valued very, very low. Yeah. The teaching, the salary is just horrible. I'm just sick and upset. I don't know when we're ever gonna think education is a good investment, starting from early childhood. And another thing is that the way sometimes
it's hard.
Yes, dear.
Sorry, I'm just trying to be mindful of the time as well. So if you were to summarize it and talk about what was the biggest, what be one word to describe in terms of what was the lesson learned? I know, and it's really hard because you're giving us an entire training for them on running for public office right now, which is more than what we can handle right now.
Yeah.
But it was one thing, like one area that you say was the biggest challenge that you had to overcome. What would you say that was?
That part I came prepared is how to connect with former refugees, immigrants that have the votes. It was sad that they knew I was running, but very few understood what to do. So the people that really were behind me and supporting me is my fellow Americans. In fact, the majority were the Republicans. They were my friends. In South Dakota, sometimes people don't vote for you because you're of the same party affiliation. So I'm so glad I got that support. And then my opponent, who is well known, who everybody thought was going to squash me, no, I came this close to winning. So I did lose, but in a very healthy margin.
So it was good. Running again?
We're right now, let's see. We may.
Okay.
Yes.
All right.
Thank you.
So we talked about some of the challenges. We talked about the loss, and also want to talk about the win, right? What does it mean to be on the other side? What does it mean to be elected, and not only be elected, but because we are from a refugee community, that also means that we're the first most times, right? And because we don't have those other people who are ahead of us, like we are the ones who are the trailblazers in our community. And I'm so ecstatic that within a very short period of time, I mean, I ran in 2017, and since that time, I have seen more Cambodian American women run and win, and it's happening in different parts of the country. And so for me, like I said, it's, you know, being the first but not the last, and wanting to be able to create spaces and opportunities for more people to run, and think about what it means to win as well. Because once you're in that seat, I feel like there is a responsibility that we carry on our shoulders as well, in terms of making sure that we're creating the space, creating the pathway so that others can follow behind us. And so I'd like to ask the panelists to share for them what it means for them to win for their particular community, to be that leader in that community, to be that trailblazer. So let's have Representative Nguyen, Nguyen, I'm so sorry, to go ahead and share that experience. It's so different in the Midwest.
It's the East Coast and West Coast saying, no, totally get it. But now you'll remember win with win, right? So yeah. that was how we taught others to pronounce that name too. I have to say it's truly an honor to be the very first Vietnamese American woman in the legislature in the Commonwealth. And my goal is to get more people to start thinking about this at all levels of government, whether it's at the local, state, or federal level. And if you can't run for office, or maybe it's not time for you, think about getting involved with issue campaigns. It's not just about getting yourself elected, right? We are in these positions because we care about these issues. We want to fight for people who need it most. And if anything, the pandemic has shown us, has laid bare the inequities in our communities, and how do we make sure we get the resources to the people who need it most. And so my advice is that it is so important for us to go all in. You know, have to think through all the different ways that you can contribute. And actually, to Clara's point earlier, is how do we get to those voters who are not traditional voters? Because that was how I won, to make sure that we're getting to people who are not traditionally involved in politics, and get them involved, get them interested. And that's how I plan to continue to be in this position, and to help others get into this position, is to get those who are often not heard, and to help amplify their voices. And what's the best way to do is to exercise your right to vote if you can, and to be knowledgeable, and to make sure that things are translated into the languages that you need them to be. And the more we have people of color, the more we have immigrants in office, the more state agencies, federal agencies will recognize the need to make sure that they are getting materials to our communities, so that our communities have the access that they need. And so in terms of being, you know, among the first, like, that's what we need to do together, to make sure that all of our communities are represented, and to make it known, especially to the younger folks, that it is very possible that all of this, you have to see it to believe it and to be it, right? And so the more that we are in, the more of us in elected office, I think will inspire others to start thinking about this as well. And so I'm just really thrilled to be here with all of you, to be able to share this and to hear all the common experiences that we all share, because even though we're on different parts of the country, it seems as though there are many common themes. And I guess at the end of the day, it's all about getting the people to get to know you, and don't be afraid to show them the personal part too. During the campaign, especially during COVID, I started cooking for, and showing people my kitchen and showing different dishes from, the Vietnamese cuisine. And all of these are ways to get to voters and make sure that they feel like they're a part of politics. And I think that that's the most important part.
I'm thinking about, what you're saying about also having a seat at the table and the resources that we bring as well. In Illinois, it's only within the last 5 years that we actually have Asian Americans represented as part of the Asian American Caucus. And, with the rise in hate crimes that's been happening, one of the things that they advocated for and was able to have in place was educating students on Asian American history in the classrooms. And that was made possible because we had elected officials in the office that was able to advocate and make sure that it went to the governor's table and got signed. So Illinois was the first to accomplish that, but that goes to speak volumes in terms of why representation matters and why it's so critical. Representative Howard, do you want to share also about for you what it means to win and what it means for your community?
Yeah, so what Nguyen said, it's really, it's such an honor to have the trust of the community, of the constituent, of the district, to have their trust. I was so honored for their votes, to vote me in, to be their voice, to represent them. And I have lived and worked here in the city of Lowell for 30 years, but I had to earn that vote, every single vote. And, I worked for Congresswoman Nikki Saunders, who's now retired, for her entire tenure in Congress for 12 years. It's, to me, after winning, it's still such a steep learning curve for me between Congress, and the state legislature. I was going into the unknown when I decided to run. And so I just want to, for folks that consider running, I was going into the unknown. Even though, as I mentioned, I had been in many campaigns before as volunteers and worked for a member of Congress. This time I was the face of the candidacy, and I had no idea how I would be received. Or even perceived. And so, I've and it was tough because I'm a very, very shy person. I have always been shy. And so ever since I arrived here at the age of 11 and not spoken a word of English, I had to learn ABCs in grade 7. And so, and I'm still working on it, and I'm still shy. I'm not still comfortable public speaking, and I have done it, but over the years. But yeah, it's it was such quite. I had to earn every vote. I had to make sure to connect, to engage the district, to let them know why I was running, and I'm just so proud of the support I receive from my tireless team, from my volunteers who were out there in a pandemic, holding signs, phone banking, and not knocking on doors. We did ring the doorbell, but we stepped back 6 feet. And so, I mean, in a pandemic, I had over 200 volunteers, and over 200 volunteers. And so that made it happen for me in this first run, for office. What I would like to offer to those watching right now, consider running for office, I want to piggyback on what Nguyen said. get engaged, be involved, learn the issue, involve in the community, involve in community and learn the issue, volunteer, college students, intern, utilize an intern at a public office for an elected official, just learn the issue. And lastly, I just want to say, keep your eyes and ears open and make good decisions and just go for it and do it.
Thank you, Representative Howard. We want to make sure that we're also giving time for Q&A as well. So if anyone has questions that they want to go ahead and post, they can go ahead and post it in the chat, and we'll try to get to that if we can. I also just want for those who have to leave, because we also understand that it's evening time and it's also dinner time, and you've probably got your family and your children nearby. We do appreciate the time that you've spent with us, listening to the panelists and what they've been able to share with you today. And I hope that you got something out of value out of tonight's panel discussion. So as I'm looking to see if there are any questions that are coming in, I guess one thing that really kind of popped up in my mind, and just really quickly, is, I don't think any one of us really decided to run for public office except for Ms. Hart, who knew really young that she wanted to run. But it's I'm thinking about the sort of the idea, the vision we have of what it means to be an elected official, what it means to hold public office, and who holds that space, right? And that face has been changing over the years. You see more women running for office, you see more people of color running for office, and you see people like us who come from refugee communities who are running for office. Something I've learned over the years is public speaking and getting comfortable with it, even though I'm an introvert myself. And so when Representative Howard talking about how shy she is, like we're forced to step outside of our comfort zones. I guess my question to the panelists would be, would you consider yourself an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm both. When I'm speaking for others, when I'm speaking for everyone else, I can be very loud. But when I'm speaking about myself, then it's very uncomfortable, very uncomfortable. Yeah. All the nonprofits that I served on for many, many years. Someone mentioned earlier about fundraising. I became very good at fundraising, at asking for money for all these nonprofits. So when I decided to run last year, people lost jobs. People didn't have food on the table. I did not hold a fundraiser. I did not ask for money. I did not make any calls to ask for money. The generosity of the people that supported me, when they learned that I was running, they made the donation. And so I didn't even hold a Zoom fundraiser at all. So I haven't had a fundraiser yet since my election last year.
And guys, I see one question. Stephen Fink has his hand raised, so I'm going to click allow to talk. Stephen, are you there? Do you have a question?
Yes, Tram knows me well. There are really two things I wanted to say. First of all, Tram is part of our community. She's in the middle of our community now. There is great potential here. I am a proud backer of Tram and have been since the first time I spoke to her. And yeah, I've traveled a lot in Asia Pacific world, but I grew up here in the United States. But boy, am I concerned about, Tram and I have been doing some work on Asian hate crimes, and the research that we've been doing, again, speaking as the white guy, has been truly shocking. And so they're both mainstream issues that Trump's helping us with, but she's also driving some leadership around the hate crime world. And I, for one, want to be behind her, helping on everything she's doing. And I think for people that are on the call thinking about running, somehow there are two sides to this. Yes, representing your communities, but also if it works right, we just get used to a spectrum of people that we work together with in the political domain. And to me, that's the goal, is that this would just be a natural part of the way we do things, that we would have all of these voices together helping us and helping us understand. And as Tram has taught me so much, I know her story about moving from Vietnam. I know her story about growing up and learning English. Those weren't things I had to do. But boy, I'm much more aware than I was. So I just wanted to salute you all for doing this. I'm so glad I had a chance to be part of this. And keep going. Don't give up. Keep going. And Vanna, I want to talk about Lowell, but that'll take much more time than we have, but I'll find a way to do it.
Thanks a lot, Stephen. Thank you for your support and joining us in this conversation tonight. Appreciate that. I have a
Kim, if I may
yeah,
for a sec, I think what Stephen said actually ties into your question earlier about being an extrovert or introvert and how to ask for money. I think
Right.
for most of us, it's very difficult to do that. And as Stephen already admitted it, he's one of my backers. And in my mind, how I could overcome asking for money is that we need to think about, this is not for me. This is about the change. This is about the movement. And to give you a prime example of this, like I said, my opponent was an anti-immigrant, anti-LGBTQ, anti-climate change, you name it, he's anti that. And because of all the supporters like Steve and so many others in the district, I was able to not only flip the seat, but work on issues that this district never would have dreamed that it would work on. For instance, recently, one of my bills that was passed was the very first bill that would help undocumented people in Massachusetts. And it just passed this year. We went from an anti-immigrant legislator to someone who championed a bill to help immigrants. And then also, to Stephen's point, someone who's championed hate crimes issues to make sure that we are addressing the xenophobia that has existed since the start of COVID. So your efforts and your support of candidates have real life impact. And that's why when I ask for money, that's what I think about. It is not for me. It's to keep me in office so I can continue to do this work.
And I don't know if you can still hear me, but that's why I back Tram. It's the issues. And you were talking about to do something, not to be something, Vanna, and I think that's great. So I think these are very real issues that Tram brought forward. And obviously she hit a nerve in our community, and a lot of us felt just the way Tram felt. And she's our person. You know, she's my guy, you know. That's exactly what's going on here.
I'm sure she appreciates your support. Thanks for your comments and your feedback, Stephen. Ms. Hart, can you just share with us really briefly, do you consider yourself an introvert and extrovert? And how that in your role? Oh, you're muted. Oh, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Okay, what about now?
Yes.
Okay, this introvert, aka extrovert, when it's possible, I think one of our panelists mentioned that if it is about me, I'm really, really shy, like, you know, raising money. But if it's somebody else whom I'm advocating for, oh gosh, I don't even know who I am. I just go all the way. It's hands on deck.
Yeah.
And, but then I ended up learning that raising money is not going door to door or calling people on, you know, online. Is that your manager, it has to create some support groups where you can go and speak, women's organizations or people who are pro environment, all that. That's how people make money. Because when those people host your campaign, it means they have collected themselves to support you. So, and during my second run was good. Third run, I had the most money than anybody in this state of South Dakota. And that was due to being endorsed by Senator Bernie Sanders. When he came to South Dakota, and I don't know what happened, and he ended up endorsing 8 of us. South Dakota, California, a few people, if you remember that news article, May 26, 2016. With all that money, I mean, I could have won even running for House of Representative. No, that turned out to be a curse among people who are within my political affiliation. The jealousy, the sabotage, the people that sabotage my campaign, it's the people that are in my group. So I lost the worst having all that money. It was horrible. It hurts even now. Yeah.
Well, and the reason why I asked that question is because I think most people, we don't think about running for office. And so for me personally, and I think about, what are some of the obstacles and challenges and whether or not you envision yourself being in that role or not on the other side of the table, how your perception of yourself impacts that. But, and also you're talking about like being able to go out there and campaign for yourself and to fundraise and to develop all these skills. It gets to a point where regardless of whether you're typically an introvert, extrovert, you step beyond yourself and you step into this role where it's the issues that help move things forward, and you're working towards a cause, you're advocating on behalf of people. And so that becomes larger than yourself, right? And who we are. And I think, that's something that I hear as a common theme throughout in this conversation, that none of us did it for us. None of us even thought about who us was. We thought about the issues and the community and what was important for us and what we had to do, whether it was a responsibility to help move those issues or the community forward. And that we were probably the best person at the time to do that as well. And that's why we decided to step up and to run. I'm mindful of the time, but I do have one last question to ask everyone. And if you could just briefly just share, who was it that you spoke with first when you decided when you were either asked to or considered running for office? Who did you go to first to have that conversation with?
My husband and my friends who had run or ran some other political offices, because they have the knowledge, so we can come back and help me raise funds and also promote my issues. But my husband first. Had to ask for permission.
Representative Howard?
Actually, I didn't need to even discuss it with my husband. He was already 100%, where I was at 25%. But so I did gather mentors, friends, close friends. I gathered them together and letting them know that I was considering. And so some were very honest, which I appreciated that. And some were not sure, not right now, or, oh, there are other candidates that are more qualified than you. And so, yeah. And so I met with a few folks, and
I'm glad you didn't listen to them. You decided to run it.
Well, the phrase that they use over and over with me here in the city of Lowell, there's the old school. Oh, you're not going to be running. Don't be running against the old school. And so so they were honest. They were honest, and some were not. Yeah.
I wish we had more time to talk about it, just to dig deeper into what that means just within our own communities, and because it's a tough battle for them to also see us in this position, because they've never seen it before and they're not used to that, and that's definitely a challenge in itself.
Yeah, to this day, being a Cambodian woman, I just want to say briefly, to this day, I've been elected now, 10 months into it. I still have my Cambodian American men that have seen me, met me, refused to even congratulate me.
Yeah, I'm with you. I'm totally with you. I'm with you there.
Passing me by, ignore me, not even congratulate. Yeah.
But the sisterhood has grown, so I appreciate that. Representative Nguyen?
Yeah, no, I think that this definitely calls for a longer conversation. But for me, and this is the advice I want to give to everyone too, is that literally reach out to everyone, because, first of all, the first person always should be your family, because you definitely need the support. It is 100% or nothing, because you're going to live, breathe the campaign, and you need family to step up to, I have 2 dogs who are going to walk my dogs for me when I forget, or who are going to feed them when I forget to feed them because I've been out all day door knocking. And also, like I said earlier, the financial support is huge as well. Not all of us have that financial support, but it's certainly very important in order to try to feed yourself as you're the candidate and trying to, do that work 100% of the time. And I think also the importance of reaching out to everyone is you don't know who will be a supporter, and every single dollar counts in this race, especially as a new candidate, as a non-traditional candidate. You need to prove that you are viable. And how do you prove that you're viable? That you can raise money. And so I started with family. I called every single family member and asked for money. And in fact, I tell this people this all the time too. I even called ex-boyfriends.
I've done that too.
You donate $100 to my campaign.
Yeah.
But that's what it takes, because we have such a short period of time to prove to people that you can do it. And so and people look to see, oh, well, this person donated to you, so I should too. And so they, like, the influencers are very important in the community. And so it is so key to think about who to ask and just not be shy to ask, because there will be people coming out for you, and you need that initial support to kind of propel you into the campaign. And so I'm really thrilled and excited that, I was able to get the support in the beginning, not only with family members, but also friends and neighbors. But at the end of the day, money can only do so much. You need to really just give 100% of your time and effort into doing everything that you can to get every single vote possible.
Well, ladies, it has been a complete pleasure being on this panel with you, being able to share this space with you, being able to learn from your experiences and just the breadth of, who you are and what you've done for your community. So I want to applaud you and thank you so much for doing that, for deciding to run for office, for sharing your story, for being here today. And for those who are joining us and who are on the fence thinking about it, maybe have their interest piqued about running for office. I guess our message to you is that we need you. We need you on this side with us. We need you because when those issues come up, representation matters. When we talk about democracy, authentic democracy, it means that we have faces that represent and look like the communities that we serve. And we don't have that if the people who are serving don't look like us. And it makes a huge difference, especially when we talk about barriers and comfort levels. There are people who simply, just because I'm Asian American, are more comfortable speaking with me and talking about what they really feel about, local government versus someone else who's been there for a long time because they don't know or don't trust that person. So just being able to make government more accessible is a huge difference in itself. And so we need you, and I hope that you will consider running for office yourself or supporting candidates like you to run for office. So thank you so much for being with us this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Khemarey.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Have a
Bye.
good evening.
Elizabeth.